Alright, hey there guys, it's Metro and we're back with Cop doing another video in the new player Mythic Plus guide series. And this time we're in Motherlode, which Cop self-professes says this is one of his best dungeons. Would you say so?
I That's an interesting way to put it. What I said was, I think I've run this one like 3 or 4 times, and almost know what some of the possibilities could be.
Okay, there you go. So he's got a little bit of a head start, and that makes sense because Motherlode is a dungeon that, it's a very flavorful dungeon. There's a lot going on, and it's pretty unique in terms of BFA dungeons. Really, the thing I notice the most always is the fact that this crazy skybox is. I love this purple skybox. I wish you can get that outside the dungeon, but we're not talking about that today. What we're talking about is the actual Mythic Plus elements of it. So right out of the gate, you're gonna see a lot of choices to be made in Motherlode. There's probably something like 300+% count in here. If you killed every single mob in the game, in the dungeon, you would probably have well over 300%. And a lot of people use that to their advantage. So if you've ever watched me do Motherlode in the past, you would know that I do a route that, earns the ire of some people. They really want to do these fancy double death skip routes. I don't ever feel like dying twice is worth it. But after doing a 20 Motherlode last night, some things have changed, on my opinion. So I think this is the perfect time to record this one, because a lot of people. So basically, what a lot of people like to do is they like to try to get basically 100% count before they kill the second boss effectively. Get like all the trash done, and then double death skip to the last two bosses, and that's that. So there's a variety of reasons I don't like this. Number one is dying is not a good thing. This kind of sits in my mind from back in the old days when we did die on purpose all the time, in especially WOD challenge modes. That was to reset things like Bloodlust, and also, it would actually clear Bloodlust, but also it would save you a ton of time. Sometimes you might die on one side of the dungeon, res on the other side. So those types of skips are always in the back of my mind when we're talking about death skips, and these are just not that anymore. There's no resetting Bloodlust. There's no skipping anything like, resing and skipping something. You still have to execute actual controlled wipes with somebody battle resing or health stone or soul stones or a shaman onking, something like that. And those are just inherently dangerous. They're risky. They're not without flaws. So every once in a while, maybe more often than not, sometimes you're gonna fail them. And if you fail them, that's it. You don't have any hope. You're done. You've just wasted multiple minutes here. You now have to try it again and hope that, whatever reason you failed it for the first time doesn't plague you another time. So I really don't like doing this in a group that's very unorganized. But last night when we did this, I really found that the trash at the end is actually insane. Like, it was the first time I had ever done 20 Motherlode, and this week we actually did 18 Motherlode, and we crushed it. I had no problems with it on stream. We did it on stream. Double upgraded to 17 Motherlode as well. Did the same route I've been doing, no problems whatsoever. Then we got to 20 Motherlode. So we'll talk about the trash at the end and my new thoughts on it. But the reason we're telling you this out of the gate is because right now in Season 3, I'm probably not changing anything. That'll probably be the last time I do a really hard fortified, a really high, that is, key fortified and Motherlode. But next season, I am definitely going to be a lot more open to trying some different strategies here, because you're not going to actually have to die to skip a lot of this stuff. And that's a very big thing for me, because, dying, you lose time, you lose your food buff, you invite mistakes, and most importantly, it's just bad for morale. Like sitting there waiting around, rezzing people, hoping that everybody does everything perfectly, not knowing if you should pull when they're at 100% health or go at 70, like people are getting healed up. I don't know. I just never really like it since WOD, and that's my historical perspective for anybody who's wondering how I feel about the Motherlode situation. But let's get started. So, there's going to be a lot of options, and like I said, one of the main options is how you want to pull trash. The way I like to do it is I basically just start with this pack here. This mechanic here, this throw wrench, it actually does a lot of physical damage. So if you're the tank especially, you really want to avoid, you want to use some type of mitigation on these mobs. Even though they're non-elites, they can be extremely dangerous, especially on certain affixes. So I would normally pull this pack, and then I would normally pull this next pack here, the Mech Jockey. I sculled that pack right there. But, if you're very worried about time and you're on a very easy boss week, like this current week, is you might actually consider pulling both of these packs together and bloodlusting here. And this is actually not a bad option, even on other weeks. because Bloodlust is almost like it's going to be really close to being backup for the boss. And you could, you could change your route to make sure it is backup, but this won't work on a Tyrannical week because the trash is just going to have such little, it's going to have much less health. It's going to take you much less than 10 minutes to get to that boss. So basically you'd have to do that and then do the whole like get like a 1,000,000,000% count early to make sure it was back up for the first boss. And on a Tyrannical week, I do think that you should always lust for that boss. But anyway, let's proceed like the dungeon is happening normally. So these mech jockeys, what they're going to do here, actually you're going to see it right now. They're going to try to get into that mech. And if they do, they actually turn into a new mob, which gives dramatically more count. Plus, you get their credit for them dying. So this is actually another tip that people always try to get me to do. But the route I run, I don't need extra count. So even though this is really good count, there's nothing that my route can really skip. So this is one of the big criticisms I have all the time when I'm streaming and doing this key. People think you should let these mobs get in the jockeys all the time, and I totally understand. As you see, you basically get 2 mobs worth of count for free. I mean, it's not free, you still have to kill them, but it's a lot easier than most other packs, and you really do get a lot of free count from it. But for me, I'm good. We're good on count. So typically what I do is I just prevent them from getting in the robot, and the way you do that is when they're casting that channel on the robot itself, just stun them, knock them back, grip them, anything like that, and then it'll stop. So if you do this with me right now, you'll see that. And as a monk, you could use ring to stop them from doing that. You could stun them, paralyze them, anything like that. But this dungeon is going to be the dungeon for disrupting mobs, so really good option. Monk is a really good one for this. And you're going to see another mob that's going to need to be disrupted heavily here. This vendor, this ice spritzer. There you go, we stunned it. This ice spritzer mechanic is going to be a channel on a person, and it's going to put them in a block of ice if it gets off. And that doesn't sound too big of a deal. It also has this Cajicola refresher, which puts a heal on, as you see on this labor, healing for 5% of maximum health every 2 seconds. So you want to interrupt everything here, and that's kind of just the going trend in this dungeon. Can you interrupt it? Yes, you should. There's really nothing that you don't want to interrupt if they're casting. And a lot of these mobs are going to be really filled with things to disrupt. So that's another reason why I think a lot of people like to skip a lot of the stuff at the end, because it's got a lot of pesky mechanics. And for me as a Blood DK, I feel very well equipped to deal with them. And as long as the group, has somebody who could help deal with them, I usually don't feel like I'm out of my element. But again, depending on how hard the trash is, you might have to deal with that. So again, another vendor here. There's pretty much 3 packs in this area here that you're going to have to deal with. Also, this Inhale Vapor, as you'll see, it's a buff, physical damage increased by 50%. These adult thugs, they do a charge. They're going to charge probably your healer. So you got to be really careful here. You want to try to interrupt that if you can, but at the same time, you got to interrupt the vendor too. So usually these get off. You could also, I believe you could soothe this as a druid. Not 100% sure, but I'm pretty confident that you could soothe that mechanic there. Now anyway, a lot of the times I would have tried to combine these packs here, the 2 we just killed and maybe those mobs over there that I just marked. You could also try to pull those mobs over there, the blue and the moon, but realistically you don't want to do that because those mobs are way more important in terms of focus than the thugs. The thugs just do damage, they don't really do anything else. But the key thing here is these rowdy revelers. These mobs are actually, they're 100k health. They have almost no health at all. They're non-elites. They're just in they're yellows. They're not even going to aggro you. But if you pull a lot of these, they could really mess up your key. And it depends a lot on the affixes, of course. But Sanguine is the _1, and really also Busting as well. Sanguine especially, though, is just absolutely GG. If you pull a ton of these, you are in serious trouble. They're going to really compromise your route. And it's very difficult not to pull a lot of these. So the main reason I like to pull, like I was just saying, where we'll double up and we have pulled this pack here, is so I can get them away from the yellow. So I'd have pulled the 2 that we fought earlier and these 2 now. I would have pulled them kind of back to right about here. We fight them right about here, and we just really want to avoid the revelers. And again, it won't matter most weeks. 9 out of 10 weeks, it won't actually be a problem. But some weeks, like, you're gonna know it when it's a problem. Let me put it that way. And this dungeon can be an absolute nightmare on Sanguine. If people pull a bunch of extra yellow mobs and stuff in general, it's gonna have to force you to move. You're gonna not be able to take the route you want at times because the ground's just gonna be covered in Sanguine. And it happens, okay, so it happens a lot with Ellie Shaman. Chain Lightning has a very long bounce radius, and it's very easy. If these mobs are anywhere near the Revelers, it's going to hit them for sure. So you got to be careful if you have an Ellie Shaman. Also happens all the time with Protection Paladin, Shield of Avenger Shield or whatever, that bounces really far as well. And Throw Glaive as well if you have a Demon Hunter. So those types of things, you know, the Paladin, obviously, the tank hopefully knows what he's doing. He's not going to do it. The Demon Hunter is probably not even going to use Throw Glaive. But if you have an Ellie Shaman, keep your eye out, because almost assuredly his Chain Lightning is going to aggro those mobs. And a lot of the times I think they do it on purpose because it helps their numbers. But that could be a bigger issue than it sounds like it would be. So now here's another choice that you have here. A lot of people might want to skip this pack, and I don't mind doing it either on Fortified. It's harder than it looks. You have to be very careful here to hug the wall. You have to kind of walk over this box and then jump down there. If you're anywhere to the left of that box or right of it, depending on your perspective, it will aggro that pack. But we are going to fight that pack because I want to show you something very specific about this assassin that I marked with the skull. This is probably the hardest mob type in here, potentially the most dangerous, that is. Not necessarily for the tank, but for the whole group. He's going to basically only do two things. One of them is he's going to basically coat his weapons in poison, just like a rogue might. And that on its own doesn't really do a lot. But then he's going to do a Fan of Knives type ability. And that ability is a channel. He does like a Fan of Knives, like I think 4 times throughout the channel. So if he has his blade coated in the poison and he does the Fan of Knives ability, it's going to poison every single player in the group who gets hit by it. Now, of course, it can be dispelled, but if you let that damage plus the poison go kind of out of control, you're probably going to wipe on a serious Fortified key. So this is where interrupting and things like death grips and rings and paralysis and stuns and actual interrupts, these are the things that actually matter to whether or not you're going to succeed in this key or not. Like if you come in here with 5 people who don't care about interrupting, stunning, blah blah blah, just don't even do this key. You're just gonna wipe. You're gonna like literally wipe to every trash pack. So let's watch it happen. I'm gonna keep the vendor isolated. I don't interrupt the assassin. I want to see the full gambit of mechanics. So there's toxic blades there, as you see. Melee attacks and hail of fletchets apply Widowmaker toxin, and as you see, it is stacking up on me over here. 4-5 stacks now, 17k. So that's pretty nuts. It's actually on 0, still a lot. And it goes off pretty quick, can be dispelled. Like I said, you have a Mistweaver monk, you might not have to deal with it. But the best way to deal with it is just stun the mob. You could stun him, you could death grip him. I believe knockback should work too, things like Ring of Peace, paralysis, anything like that. But you really got to interrupt the toxic blades, because if you don't, it's just going to be one way or the other, it's going to be bad. That's step 1, and then hail of fletchets, as you see, grip him. Thanks for stopping by, no longer doing the mechanic. So that's a mob that you're going to fight a couple times, and depending on what route you take from now on, you might fight him a lot more than a couple times. So if you're anybody who has any type of stun, interrupt, knockback, you really want to be attentive on that mob type. You do not want to let that mob get out of control. Okay, so here's another bit of choice that you could also make here. And like I said, if you're going to go for the like, pretty much like, I think it's like 66% before the first boss, you're going to want to have to pull pretty much all of the right side here. There's no really way to do this other than pull all of the trash leading up to the first boss. So you would do that by pulling this pack here. This is a pack a lot of people pull anyway. It's a pretty easy pack. It's got 2 laborers and again a mech jockey. And like I said, a lot of people value the mechs as just absolutely insane, but I don't. So, you know, I would stun like Hop did, or I would also just grip it or something like that to prevent it from happening if we pulled this pack. Typically, I don't pull this pack because, again, I don't need the count in my route. But, yeah, luckily, one way or the other, it doesn't matter on 0. But luckily, if you do pull this, there's plenty of things that you can skip on the very end. Now, typically what I would have done is I would have hugged this wall here. This is a little bit of an awkward thing here because there's this cage you often get stuck on. So basically what you want to do is you want to run about 1 yard past the wall and then turn. You kind of fall a bit, you'll notice it. Here, it's actually kind of a big deal, so you should practice it, Cop. because if you don't do this right, you might aggro the trash here. So basically, just run along the wall, and then a yard past the wall, you'll kind of fall, and then you just turn left here. Stuck, and you don't pull anything. Basically, what we're trying to do is avoid aggroing the mechanized peacekeeper there. You see the skull. We're going to pull this pack first, and we can do that pretty easily with gore fiends. But either way, you know, if you don't have gore fiends, no big deal. Just try to get them and maybe kind of duck behind this house. They're going to throw the wrenches again, so that's 3 mobs throwing the wrench. If you're the tank, you're going to want to be defensive. If you're a damage dealer, you might want to try to stun them or something like that to help your tank out. And otherwise, very, very, very easy pack again. This pack or the other pack that we just we pulled, but we probably wouldn't pull if you're doing a normal key. I would say these are probably like the packs in the game. And that's why a lot of people try to get count here. It's a lot of relatively high value mobs with very low, you know, potential issues. So we got another mechanized peacekeeper. This is a mob that you might have seen again if you put the mob in the suit. But really, it's just does this AoE, kind of like a charge lightning. And then it does this gas cloud. You just want to make sure you move out of that, because if you don't, it's going to disorient you, and if you're the tank, that's bad news. Obviously, that's going to get hit. And then it's got another energy shield like mechanic. We talked about this in King's Rest, but just got to make sure you're behind the energy shield. Otherwise, your damage is like literally not going to do anything. So, and then the mech jockey. This doesn't actually happen on Mythic Plus, only on 0 it comes. So another pretty common thing here when I'm doing my route, and again, especially with Sanguine, is I'm going to mark these packs here. These packs are no pull. You do not want to aggro these packs, and it's very easy to do it. So one of the main reasons it's easy to do it is because these mobs here kind of displace you a bit. The mech jockey might knock you back with one of its mechanics. If they're Sanguine, you know, you're going to think, like, for example, let's say we're pulling this pack here. I normally grip this to get the caster in so we don't have to waste an interrupt on it, and then we will kill them. At this point, we'd kill them, and then there'd be Sanguine on the ground. See that concussion? That thing will actually knock you back, by the way. Get hit by that red circle. But anyway, we kill all 3 of these, and there'd be a puddle of Sanguine here. You know, sometimes maybe people even aggro the Revelers. So then let's kill this first, but here, I'll show you get the knockback. See, you get knockback, mech jockey. That's interruptible, of course. But again, there's pretty much like 4 different things that you need to interrupt on 3 mobs, so not always going to have something for every one of them. That one's the easiest to not interrupt. You probably don't need to worry about it. But anyway, so let's say that we've just killed, you know, we've just done a pack with Sanguine. Now have a puddle of Sanguine going from about blue to about green, okay? So kill them back here. It's a little dangerous, right? A lot of people are going to try to go like this, you know what I mean? And that's fine. But if it's any further than this, you might actually run into those mobs. Like, they're a lot closer than they look. And sometimes they have an emissary pack there. So basically, you just really got to stay to the left of this little path here. If you go any further than that, you're really running the risk of pulling that pack. And again, you're just going to want to try to avoid fighting near this little entrance, this little area here. Because it's very, very likely that you're going to pull Revelers. And it's just really bad. Like, they don't give any count. They're dead weight. They're dead. Like, they don't help you in any way progress the dungeon. And on some affixes, they could be so bad that they might actually end you. Got to keep an eye on that. Okay, so now another pack here with a jockey. I always let him get to the robot and then grip him in, and then immediately interrupt Toxic Blades. Exactly like that. The mob's gonna run. By the time it gets there, Toxic Blades will be casting. You grip and then interrupt. And Cop actually successfully interrupted with his stun. So that was perfect. So that's exactly what you gotta do. Another assassin, another mech jockey. So dodge the interrupt, dodge the knockback, concussion, charge there, dodge that. And then just try to grip Hail of Fletchets, interrupt Toxic Blades. That's it. Main things, everybody's got to deal with it. If you don't have grip, something like that, you're going to need to stun whatever you got. Anything that you can use to prevent the mob from casting its ability, you just want to try to interrupt it like it's an actual interruptible spell with the ability. Alright, same deal here. Another vendor, another 2 things you need to interrupt, mech jockey, another thing you gotta dodge. So I like to put D&D slow here. I'll interrupt and then I'll grip, and then that's the pack right there. Dodge that, and we go nice little AoE here. I like these 4 targets, especially because 2 of them are non-elites. So that's pretty quick. So get this killed. Kick the heal, that's the heal right there. Catch a cola refreshment, we got the kick or we got the stun, either way it's fine. And just prevent anything that's happening with, multiple things. That's why I love DK in this dungeon. A lot of people, I feel like they don't think about that. They don't really focus on it, but DK has pretty much 4 or 5 different ways that I could stop mobs from casting in one specific pack. So, okay, so now is the time that you would probably start thinking about getting extra count. So, I'm telling you this especially because in the future, it's very likely that people are going to do this just de facto. There's not really going to be any detriment to it once you have the next season's fixes, provided they are in a good spot for it. So a lot of people would probably pull, pretty much, they would have pulled the packs that we skipped along the way for sure. And then they would a lot of people just go right instead of left. But they would definitely pull pretty much everything from here, that pack there, probably to along the wall there, down by that blue marker. They'd pretty much get, that's like about 5 different packs along the way. And that's usually going to get you pretty close to about 60%, which is where I've seen a lot of people be satisfied. But either way, I don't ever pull that right now. I definitely, like I said, I'm going to be more open to it in the future, especially skipping the last split after the third boss. I don't really feel like the third boss's trash is particularly dangerous. It is difficult and it's got a lot of health, but it's not nearly as bad as people say it is. But the pack immediately following Rixa and immediately preceding Mogul are definitely extremely dangerous. So, yeah, like I said, I learned that last night on that 20. It was pretty eye-opening. Again, another dangerous pack here. Interrupt the Spritzer. Assassin, make sure he doesn't get the toxic blades off. And obviously, don't hit the shield. He can't actually damage the shield up, you know what I mean? So, he'll fletch it, switch to script it. There you go. Cops in a little ice block. How's that feel, man? Nice and cool?
It's awful chilly. Giving me a cold. I just sneezed.
Yeah, I could tell. We stun that, interrupt the heal, blah, blah, blah. Very good. So nothing special. The trash is, like I said, very easily manipulated, but you got to be ready to manipulate it. If you're going to come in here not ready for it, then you're probably going to get carried, frankly. Somebody who's not interrupting or, like, knocking back, stuff like that is going to really, they're not going to do a great job on this. Okay, so anyway, this fight. Now, something I should bring up is this fight is actually skippable. If for some reason you ever wanted to do that, like we were talking about with the Lust situation, you can literally just skip this boss if you want. You have to kill him to complete the Mythic Plus requirements, but if you wanted to come back to this boss, you could easily just run around him. In fact, you could do this with every single boss in this dungeon. You could skip every boss in this dungeon if you wanted to only kill trash and then kill all the bosses for some absurd reason. But, maybe people do that in Season 4. I don't know. Either way, a lot, like I said, if you're doing Lust on the pull, you might want to do that. You might want to come here and then get these 2 packs. We'll come back and talk about that after, but for now we'll do the boss one way or the other. So the boss is actually a pretty complicated encounter for a lot of reasons. But the main thing is there's one mechanic that you have to do extremely well, and if you do, it makes it very, very easy. It's this little, like these footballs, whatever, like soccer balls. You kick them at him and he takes extra damage, and they do stack. So what you want to do is he's going to throw 3 of them out. You want to get 2 immediately, and then you want to hang on to the 3rd for as long as feasible. Like, you don't want to wait so long that it's risky, but you definitely want to wait a couple seconds. So the problem is damage dealers almost never want to do this, right? Like, who wants to not DPS the boss? Nobody. So somebody has to do it. It's not optional. If you don't click any of the 3, you're just going to die, because then they explode on you instead, and then you take extra damage and have a dot on you. So you have to kick all 3 for sure. Sometimes you'll miss 1, but you definitely can't miss 3. And really, it's best to just have really mobile damage dealers. Like, obviously, Monk would be great at it, so that'd be good for you, Cop. But the thing is, a lot of people, typically you'd fight a boss and you'd pop everything on the pull. But for this boss, since about 20 seconds into the boss, he's going to take a bunch more % damage from these football things. You're going to want to wait to Lust, wait to pop your CD. So basically, just kind of go in there, generate some resources, hang out for a bit. And then when the bombs come out, kick 2, Bloodlust, somebody kicks the 3rd while Lust is up. That's that. Lights out, you're going to do probably about 50% of the boss's health in the duration of Bloodlust easily. I mean, that's on a hard key. Realistically, on a lower key, you might not kill him. So it's pretty straightforward encounter if you do that right. But the other thing is the coins. As a tank, you got to keep kiting him. It's kind of difficult to get the pattern down as a tank, honestly. But you'll get used to it. It's just kind of every 2 mechanics he'll do the throw coins, and whenever he does it, you just got to move him immediately. Every other time he does throw coins, he'll alternate with one of the stationary mechanics. So he'll either do the frontal lightning charge thingy, which if he does that, you just got to move out of that. Nothing special there. Just move. And then the other one's the knockback. You can't avoid that. You're going to get knocked back unless okay. If you are a DK, you could use Death's Advance to prevent the knockback, and it's nature damage. So S. Monk have magic mitigation too, so that's nature damage. It actually does a lot of damage, so you should do that. But anyway, yeah, moving him in between those mechanics is harder than it sounds, so you got to be really accurate with that. Don't let him get the coins. Every time he gets the coins, he does more damage. Very short, and this is a fight that you're actually going to take a lot of damage if you get a lot of coins. All right, so let's see it. We'll show you what I mean by the the situation there about how he's got a ton of health even on a 0, as you can see, but you're gonna be able to mow through him because here's the knockback. As you see, I'm gonna AMS, not gonna get knocked back, gonna take a little bit of magic damage reduced, and that's that. So here's the foot bomb. So we want to kick those, and then again, shocking claw is the mechanic you just move from. I'll just get hit by it to show you. It stuns, does a bunch of magic damage. You really don't want to get hit, and I guess it also breaks the foot bombs. Did that happen? Yeah, I just noticed that. That must be the case, though. Anyway, it provided you kicked all 3, you would then, you would pop Lust, you'd pop all your CDs, your essences, and everything like that, and just light them up. But that's it. Throw coins every time it happens. You want to move them. You want to wait until all the coins are down to move him, because if you move him too quickly, he's just going to drop coins where he moves. Not ideal. And then the foot bombs, like I said, so every time it happens, just got to kick him. One problem here is if you, you have the boss trying to go get one of these, you might accidentally move him away as one is kicked. You can kick them twice. Like if Cop missed with that one, he'd be able to go and get it again. But as you see, it stacks up 3 times, 150% damage taken with 3 stacks, and it has a duration. So you definitely want to get maybe something to track it one way or the other. You'll look at it, you'll notice, hopefully either way, and you'll just try to elongate it as much as possible. Like I say, if all 3 hit at the exact same time, you're just kind of wasting a couple seconds of big damage increase. Not the end of the world, but something that you want to try to maximize for sure. Okay, so there you go. You see it, it's lasting 15 seconds. Cop's going to kick it now. Just kidding.
There
you go.
I tried to click on it and didn't get it.
Yeah, so it refreshes 15 seconds. And as you see, we actually missed one. So now we're taking 50% extra damage, and we just got by the static pulse. So yeah, it's not your ideal situation here. Obviously, you're going to do this for more than 2 people. Should be very easy to kick 3.
And they are directional, right? That's what I'm understanding. Like, you actually have to aim where you're kicking them?
Correct. There'll be a little arrow in front of the foot bomb, and you kick it that direction. As long as you're targeting the boss, it should get there. It only goes about 30 yards or so, like I said. So you might miss. You might, if the boss is being moved, you might not move him far. You might move him too far. You might not kick it far enough. You can just go up and kick it again. You got, I think it's about maybe 15, 20 seconds to kick them before they expire. So plenty of time. Just gotta, somebody has to do it. That's the big thing. It's so hard to get people to want to do it, you know?
Because I noticed the first time I tried to do that on that fight, it went 90 degrees the other way because I wasn't facing the boss. So
Yeah.
So you got to be kind of very specific about that.
See, I'm glad you're here because I wouldn't have even thought to explain that, but these are the things that we got to talk about in this video. So yeah, it is a targeted. You kick it. You're just like Cristiano Ronaldo. You know what I mean? You're gonna kick it, and then you're gonna pretend you got fouled, and that's that. You know what I mean? That's gonna be really good.
Red card.
Yeah, okay, so anyway, next up is almost always a combined pack here. There's very little chance to combine packs in this dungeon because so many of the mechanics overlap with each other, but this is a great opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about what this trash does. The Mind Rats, effectively, again, non-elites, they just do a bunch of damage. They can do damage to non-tanks, like pretty often they'll hit the non-tanks with their mechanic, but outside of really hard fortified keys, it just doesn't really matter. It's just damage. Then the Earth Shapers, these are the ones that you really want to be careful for. They do an ability called Rock Lance. It hits the tank, or at least it hits their primary target, for an insane amount of, I believe, nature damage. So definitely want to interrupt that. The problem with it is there's another cast on these mobs that doesn't really need to be interrupted. It's called Earth Shield. Doesn't do any damage at all. I guess it heals them. I'm not even 100% sure because it's so inconsequential. Like comparatively to Rock Lance, it is a non-kick. You don't even want to think about it. But a lot of the times, you're so hyper-focused thinking, I gotta kick. Pick the wrong freaking thing. It happens all the time. I do it myself. Luckily, as a DK, I can AMS it. Prot Warrior, you can spell reflect it. A lot of options out there for tanks, but if you are fighting a lot of Earth Shapers and they're doing a lot of casts uninterrupted, you're gonna just straight up die, no matter what the key is. So I'm just telling you that because, if you pull just this pack on the right here alone, it's not really dangerous. You're going to have one mob to kick, no big deal. But a lot of the times I'm going to open like this. I'm gonna get them all together, grip them, unload. This I always have a dancing rune weapon up here, and again, you just want to dodge any of those mechanics and kick these rock lances, stun them, ring them, knock them back, anything while they're channeling it to make sure that you're not getting hit. Pretty straightforward, especially with AoE interrupts. You see that. As you see that rock lance, oh, there you go. Nice little ring from Pop. And this throw rock mechanic, this is what the mine rats are doing. Nothing special at all. The only time you really probably don't want to do this is on a bolstering week or maybe a sanguine week, but realistically, not too bad. Now, what you saw there was that those bombs on the ground. That happens when the sappers die. They kill themselves effectively. So something to keep in mind here. When the sappers get to, I believe, 10% health, they begin channeling like a last-ditch type of thing. They're going to blow themselves up, hoping to take you with them. Don't get hit. You get hit, you're going to probably die in a real key. Happens all the time to melee. It's a little bit bigger than it looks, so just play it wide. You know, don't even think about getting close to them. No reason to risk it. And a lot of the problems with it is this kind of like unrefined textures on these rocks here. You know, if I put D&D down, you'll see it. Like about 30% of the D&D is not showing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of people might not see the edge of the bomb, and I feel like maybe you've had this happen before, huh?
Yep. Yeah. I've been sworn I was not inside that little swirl, and I've been hit and killed by it.
Yeah. It's pretty dangerous on any real key, so you're going to fight a couple of them along the way. I don't ever really pull anything else in here, but again, if you're going for the 100% count before the third boss, this is stuff you're going to pull. You're going to pull these packs here, and they're pretty easy. Like, you could easily combine more of these packs, but, you know, when you got multiple Earth Shapers, it gets a lot harder, so just keep that in mind. But now, typically, I'd kind of pull up here. Don't do that. Yeah, pretty common. You want to run here. I'm going to put some markers. I'll show you. You want to run just kind of like left of this skull marker. If you run to the right of it, you'll kind of just slide off here as you see, and then you'll fall. You have to run all the way back around. So just kind of stay left of the skull marker. And again, another big AoE pack. Good time for pre-pot and get some interrupts going. Sappers, again, when they die, they're also going to put those bombs out periodically, just a move from them. And kick the rock lance. The other problem is, of course, the bombs might draw you away from where the rock lances are. The Earth Shield, let's see this go off, and what? No, okay. I don't actually know what it does, so we'll see it, I'm sure. But I guess it just puts like a heal on them. I'm not actually 100% sure.
I would imagine it's
anyway,
just like a shaman's Earth Shield.
Probably the case. I just don't know exactly how much it does. Let's see what happens. Oh, you kicked it again.
Sorry.
Just
reflex.
Pop's getting good, man. That's how you know when you're good. You kick everything. Anyway, we'll check it out in the next pack. But something I should bring up about these sappers, you see, they're going to start the cast right about now. 10%. There we go. Okay, final blast. Now watch this. Watch this. Watch this. I interrupted that. I prevented it from killing itself. Don't do that. She was going to do it for you. Don't grip her. Don't interrupt her. I do it all the time by accident. Do not do it. Oh, what the hell?
I accidentally rolled backwards and pulled an extra pack.
Anyway, so yeah, don't interrupt that mechanic. It's not needed. It's going to kill the mob. That mechanic is the only mechanic in the dungeon that you don't want to interrupt. She's literally going to kill herself, and I see people do it all the time. They interrupt her killing herself, which is just pointless, right? So unless it's in Sanguine, no, it doesn't even matter. Even in Sanguine, she's still going to die. It doesn't matter. So yeah, don't ever interrupt that ability. I do it all the time by accident. Okay, next up here we got Stone Furies. We got Shale Biters as well, but they're non-elites. They just do this shale spit. They target a random person. Every once in a while, you'll get every one of them targeting you, but it doesn't really matter. Just kill them, burn them quick. It's not going to be a problem. This Furious Quack mechanic, though, much more dangerous. So let's talk about this mob type before we proceed. You're only really ever going to fight 3 of them, not any more that you would fight, but they are pretty dangerous for being so seldom in the dungeon. They cast one ability that is a shield. It does a big amount of shielding, and it also prevents you from interrupting while the shield holds. So you want to try to interrupt that. Otherwise, then you will have a lot harder trouble getting the tectonic thing, AoE. Because when they do that AoE, they're going to really do a ton of damage. And it's, again, a much bigger radius than it looks like it is. The amount of times I've seen that go off and just cause havoc, Pretty much every single time. I don't think I've ever had that go off and that not cause havoc. So you really got to make sure that that mechanic doesn't happen. But again, they could be knocked back, they could be stunned, they could be gripped, they could be ringed, they could be everything. Everything is applicable. Ideally, you'll interrupt the shield and then you could stun the other mechanics. But you know, we did actually last night when we did this 20, we did have this happen. All three of the shale biters targeted the healer and they actually one-shot him. All three shale spits went on the healer and they actually one-shot him. There we go. We interrupted both barriers. Now we are free to actually interrupt this. And you're going to see... Oh, well, we ringed it. You're going to see a lot of damage come from that mechanic when it does happen. So even on 0, I'd imagine it would do a lot of damage. So just make sure you do not let it happen. And you'll see this titanic barrier go off. As you see, absorbs damage, immune to interrupts while it holds. So now our only hope is actually, you know, gripping it there. So anyway... That's that. So we'll kill this quickly. Not a big problem at all. It's some of the easiest trash, but again, there's dangerous mechanics abound on every pull. Okay, at this point, things start to get a lot more interesting. From now on, every pull you fight is going to be dangerous, like really dangerous. It's not going to be really any for pulls. And this pack is one that I would definitely recommend a skip on. Okay, no matter what you're doing, I really wouldn't recommend pulling this pack unless you're sure that you can fight it. Because again, 2 Earth Shapers, 2 Sappers, and most importantly, Taskmaster Ascari, who's basically a mini boss. He puts like kind of like redirects damage from the other mobs to him, but he makes everybody take less damage overall anyway. So it's a very long pack, let's put it that way. And with 5 targets, especially on teaming. On teaming, it's like 8 targets. So there's a couple ways to skip it. Obviously, you could obviously, you could shroud it, is what I mean to say. You could, you'll have to sap the sapper just to be sure. It's a little risky to shroud just to make sure and to sap it, because otherwise somebody might run into it. Because that wall there, it's like there's like here. I'll put some mark. These rocks here are a little bit. The face of them is a little bit steep, so you couldn't run from, say, to go from blue to red. You wouldn't really be able to do that. You might fall off. So you kind of have to go from blue to about like purple and then up and around. So doing that, you might run into the sapper. So a lot of people are going to snap there. The other option is the best option, if you ask me. It's to use a warlock portal. So this is actually the only dungeon in the game that I would say bring a warlock to 100% of the time. You put it down right on this little azurite spout, and you end it at about there-ish. Yeah, right up top. It's going to teleport us from purple to green, and we're going to skip the pack entirely. You could actually do this a couple times in this dungeon, 2 that we'll talk about today. But yeah, it's actually a really good thing to have a warlock in this dungeon for that reason. The other option that I have seen, that I've heard is possible, is ring. But I don't actually know for sure. And again, we would need a hard CC for it. But yeah, you'd basically CC the sapper, and then knock the sapper and the earth shaker to the left. And apparently you could skip by to the right. Never done it myself. Never really seemed needed. But yeah, anyway, that's a couple options to skip this pack. So I definitely recommend doing it. Mostly because it's going to eat up a bunch of CDs. And one of the things that we talked about in the previous dungeons, that using all your CDs on a pack right before a boss is one of the worst things that you can do for the time. And unfortunately, all of the hardest trash is right before bosses. There's that cover mechanic, as you see, redirecting trash, redirecting damage to himself, and we'll probably see that again. Yeah, there it is. Intercepting 50% of damage taken, and damage taken is reduced by 75. So basically, he's making you do a lot less damage. Let's put it that way. He cannot be gripped. You can't really kite him very well, even though the rest of the stuff is really kiteable. That mob is a real pain, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. Also, this frontal broad slash. A lot going on in that pack. Definite skip, if you ask me, no matter my current route. Still skipping that every time. Okay, let's quickly talk a little bit about this boss. It's a very easy encounter, actually one of the easiest probably in the whole game, but it's one that people do mess up all the time. He's basically only got one mechanic, and it's Earth Ragers, okay? He's got a lot of health, and he's got these ads. These ads, they'll fixate on a player, and you're going to see it here because there's only 2 players. It's going to be a pain in the ass. But they're going to fixate on a player, and every time they melee that player while fixated, they put a bleed up. That bleed stacks, and it gets really, really, really out of control if you got stupid melee who are just sitting there tanking it. I've seen people with 5, 6, 7 stacks of it, and they just get destroyed, right? It's impossible to survive that many stacks. you're going to have to be doing a really low key, or you're going to really have to have some kind of, an immunity. If you're a rep pally or something like that, don't worry, just bubble, no big deal. But it does cause some problems here because these mobs got to die, and if you got 3 melee and they're all running around in circles, you know what I mean, then it's going to be difficult to kill them. So I'm going to show you, I actually made a video on this a long time ago. I'm going to show you a really, I just talk about it a bit, a really nice little tip here as Blood Death Knight. It's only really going to work as Blood DK. There's other ways to do it similarly for other specs, but for Blood DK, it's tier 1, number 1. You got to make sure that you save slow death and decay, which I don't actually have right now, but in normal dungeons I would have it. And you got to make sure you have Gorfiend's Grasp up. So you want to make sure that you don't use Gorfiend's Grasp on the packs preceding it, like the big pack that we just fought, or the pack before that. It won't be up. You could use it on the pack that preceded that pack, though, 3 packs ago. You can use it and it should be up. But you just want to make sure you don't D&D in the poll, which is a bad habit I have. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to interrupt all of their abilities. And now, so we have a monk as well. So a lot of the times I won't actually do that. But anyway, face the boss away and then try to get them all together and then just grip them and slow them. And then they're all going to be stuck there. And ideally, you kill them pretty easily, no problem. But yeah, Ring of Peace would have been good if you actually hit them with it. And Cop actually died to the bleed there. So even on 0, he had 8 stacks, but even on 0, you're going to see that this boss is just an absolute pain. I think I'm probably just going to skip this because it's going to be such a pain to kill with 2 people. These bleeds are no joke, and this boss has a ton of health, so obviously you're going to have to deal with this normally. But yeah, just make sure you don't get hit by the mobs. And if you're a Death Knight, you can grip them all together. The other thing you have to worry about with the mobs is you have to, like, they're going to do this channel. It's going to be this, I think it's physical damage. Going to channel this AoE. It's going to do a ton of damage. And if there's 4 targets, it's going to do a ton of damage. So you really want to prevent them from doing that. You can do that with single target stuns, but you could also just disrupt them like we tried with Ring there. But obviously that's another good option for Gorfiends. A lot of people, they might try to Gorfiends that instead. I like getting them all together and then slowing them, and then somebody else could stun. You know what I mean? Like, it's not really needed. You can just AoE stun them. Leg sweep as a monk, no problem. It's easy. So that's that. But anyway, we're just gonna skip it just for. Can't use the we can't use the cart though. So you have to run down the tracks in case anybody ever does this. Reason you skip the boss, hopefully you'll realize that these bombs, yeah, you don't want to hit them. They're gonna keep knocking you back and do fire damage. For some reason you can't use the cart. You just gotta run down the tracks, try to avoid the bombs. We successfully did. All right, sweet. So now at this point, this is where people start thinking about skipping a lot. Again, I'm not gonna do that, but if you've done everything up into this point, you've skipped, you've pulled like 90+% count, then at this point you're probably skipping a lot here. So what I like to do here is grip the assistant or the alchemist, one of the two. They're both casters. Just try to get them in, and we have a lot of interrupts again. Blowtorch, frontal fire damage, and this caustic compound. It just puts a nature dot on you. So one way or the other, more interrupts coming. You really got to be careful here and make sure that these things are interrupted because they do a lot of damage there. It's going to really add up if you're pulling high volume here. Now, something I used to do was, in the past, I used to go left behind here because you needed a little bit more count or actually, you needed a little bit. Yeah, no, count used to be different. Let's put it that way. With the with the emissaries, it's different now. So now I go right. But either way, this is more. Big thing here is you're going to pull this mastermind, and you just want to make sure. Let me go ahead and put a mark for you guys. You just want to make sure it is north of that shadow. So that skull or the red marker. Anything north of that shadow, if it's south of that shadow, it's going to aggro this pack to our right here. And if you aggro that, you're probably going to wipe. You don't want to pull that pack. That's a very dangerous pack there. But anyway, this mob has got a ton of health. It does this this channeled fire ability. It can be AMS'd. It's actually dispellable as well. So if you AMS on the upward channel, like on the cast of it, you'll actually prevent them from doing it to you. And a lot of the times they just kind of like stutter. They're like they keep trying to do it while AMS is up, so they'll just be doing nothing. It's probably one of the biggest things you can do as a tank on that pack. Otherwise, the healer can now dispel it. It used to not be dispellable, but it is now dispellable. What else? And then they do that orb. It summons this old purple orb and it kind of goes flying out into the distance. If it touches anybody, it will heal that target. So it healed the mob, not the player. So at this point, we'll cut across. We'll kill the rats. The rats are actually more dangerous than they look. They jump. Again, a lot of these low health mobs that kind of jump like that. On 0, doesn't matter. But again, busting, sanguine, like that, it's going to be dangerous. I also like to grab this mastermind. I usually would have pulled it with the rats, provided we're not in any major danger or it's not bolstering. If it's bolstering, obviously don't pull 200k health mobs with the mob that has like 2.5 million. Okay, you can AMS, whatever. You can't interrupt it, no big deal. Not a big deal. Now at this point, this is when I've been making a lot of weird decisions. A lot of times I might go this way, pull this mastermind, and then go to those testers. It's kind of not the play, I feel like. I don't know, like, it's less count, but those 3 mobs are way harder than the other package across the way. So, I don't know, it's up to you guys. We'll talk about the testers really quick. They basically only do 2 things, and they're both extremely painful. One of them is, it silences you. They do this frontal cone, and if they shoot a gun, basically, and if the gun hits you, you get silenced. So, could be really bad for some tanks. That's not a big deal for some, but it's a big deal for Blood DK, because I can't death grip. And then after that, they might do this other mechanic that is going to do a ton of damage, like probably like 50% of your health, and it's going to knock you back as well. So you want to stop that. So this is where death grip comes in handy. But if you get silenced, you can't death grip. So you got to actually, what I've been doing is I stun the one. You could also AMS it. You can't be silenced while you're AMS. So I'll usually AMS it, or I try to prevent the silence from hitting me, and then I'll Gorfien's the stun. Or I'm sorry, I'll Gorfien's knockback, the big damaging one. But you can also just skip the back. A lot of people just go right now. I used to always go left because I never thought it was a big deal. But since the emissaries have kind of forced us to go right, it's not a bad option at all. And even if there is an emissary in this pack, this weird interaction with terrain, you can actually pull the emissary up kind of right on this hill, and then all 4 of these mobs will be interruptible. But just be bugged, or I don't know. Hopefully you guys know about that. If you get the emissary of tides, for some reason, if it's on even a slightly different terrain than the mobs that you're fighting it with, they can be interrupted. Like the aura from the emissary doesn't actually happen. One other thing that we kind of just skipped when talking about these cats is transmutes. You want to kick those. They're also going to do, I believe it's the alchemist, I imagine. They're also going to try to transmute themselves. They'll turn themselves into a blob, and that will restore their health to 100%. So don't let them heal themselves to full. I mean, it should be obvious, but maybe you guys don't know about it. So again, just tons of interruptions. Really, this is one of the harder packs in the game, and especially on certain affixes, people make a lot of big mistakes here. As you see, the masterminds have 300k more health than the assistants, and that's on 0. So on a real key, they're gonna have a lot more health than the alchemists, assistants, but they're equally dangerous. So basically, what you want to do is you want to have everybody like meleeing, targeting a mastermind, just say mark a skull, and have everybody target the skull. And you want to be cleaving off it hard. But you got to be interrupting the casters too, because they're going to do the blowtorch. They're going to try to heal themselves, and they're going to try to transmute. They're going to try to turn Cop here. They're going to try to turn him into a blob. You don't like being a blob, do you?
No, I don't like being a blob.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's just what you got to do. You know what I'm saying? So, blowtorch, there it is. Caustic compound. That's the dot. Just prevent that in any way you can. We can AMS again. I'm going to AMS here. I did it a little bit late, but one way or the other, it's still reducing the magic damage. It's fine. Again, caustic compound. There you go. Nice little ring. Very good little play. Whatever you got. A lot of good options in the game to interrupt these types of mobs. Not a big deal. Use it all. Use it. Blowtorch. Interrupt that. Caustic compound again. So they didn't actually try to heal themselves. There it is. Transmute enemy. He's going to transmute enemy to goo. Oh, and it's actually the assistants. So you see, I told you, Cop is now a blob.
No, I don't like being a blob.
Yes, so please, guys, for the love of God, don't let him be a blob. That's just very rude of you to let that happen. You can just interrupt. And then it's actually the assistants, the one on the right, not the alchemists, the assistants who heal themselves to full. It's difficult because they both look the same and they just have a lot of cast, but there you go. The mob on the right, the assistants, they're going to try to heal themselves to full, so don't let that happen. Okay, here we go. Rixa, one of the most easiest bosses in the game. Strategy is foolproof with this boss, but almost nobody knows how to do it. So you're going to get the pro tips right here. We're going to execute this like a boss here. So the boss is, there's a couple bosses in the game like this now, but the boss is baited by player position on every mechanic, okay? It will only ever put mechanics down on players. There's multiple mechanics. Long story short, it's just a bunch of Azurite on the ground. Doesn't really matter. Don't stand in it. Move the boss out of it. No big deal. But the main thing that you got to be aware of is that when she does the, she starts like shooting her gun out, it's going to clear the Azurite puddles on the ground, okay? But if you don't do it right, it's not actually going to clear them. It's just going to push them to the side. So how you do it is, ideally, and like I said, this is the same thing as the last boss. You're going to want to say, like, okay, so say we're starting at Skull. We're fighting the boss at Skull. Usually I'd actually fight her in the dead center, but we can't do that for the purpose of this tutorial. So anyway, we're the boss is at Skull. Okay, we're fighting her at Skull. The puddles come like red, and they're a little bit random. So, you know, just red and yellow. There's now puddles there, okay? So after, you know, after it's time for her to do her gun mechanic, when it's happening, you want to put your back like this. You see how I am with respect to the skull? So she always shoots it this way. You want all 5 people to have their backs to the Azurite puddles on the ground. She's going to shoot. It's going to take about a second and a half. She's going to start a channel. 1, 2, move. Don't let her hit you. If she hits you, you get pushed back into it. You're probably going to die. Not good. But then it's going to get baited again. Every time she's going to try to hit players with it. So, you know, again, we start at Skull. She starts the cast. As soon as it's almost finished, run through. She's going to accidentally clear her own Azurite. And then as it's ending, run back through. Put your back to any that's left. Ideally, it would be gone. You wouldn't have to do this. But if there's a lot, like if you're later in the fight or you didn't, you know, you're kind of awkward positioning, you could do it again. But one way or the other, just make sure you have your back to the Azurite, have all 5 people stacked, and you can never get hit by that mechanic. It's easy. You know exactly where it's going. As the channel begins, just move through the boss. She's not going to turn. She's going to stay that direction, and that's that. So effectively, the fight might look like this. So we have that. We just cleared yellow, and now red is, it's still there, but it's kind of over there now instead because of the angle. So now there's more, a new one at orange, and another one over at yellow. So now we're going to move the boss from Skull. We're going to move the boss over to here, and we're going to have our backs to the yellow. You know, we're going to have our backs to these colors here. It's going to clear that. Those colors are going to get pushed over that way. More is going to come down, you know, rinse and repeat. It's just going to keep moving. We're going to just keep moving. There's going to, you know, going to be here and here, something like that. We're going to have our backs to the colors. It's going to clear it every time, and we're just going to go around the ring until the boss is dead. That's it. Easiest fight in the game. Probably easiest fight in the dungeon if you do the strategy. Yet for some reason, almost every time I ever do this key, people don't seem to understand that. I'm here to tell you guys, that's it. Super, super easy encounter. The other thing they have to be aware of is these last 2 bosses do 0 physical damage. Their auto attacks are magic. So if you're a Blood DK, pretty easy. But if you're any other tank, yeah, it's a tough one for sure. Another thing here, this chemical burn, it's always going to pick the 2 closest targets. So for some reason the tank is not close enough, you're going to need to make sure you want to be close enough, let's put it that way. So here you see we got a little bit unlucky. I'm going to put my back to this puddle, and she's always going to blow the puddle away now. You see, repellent bats run through, blah, blah, blah. Puddle's gone. I'm going to put my back to this puddle now. 1, 2, 3. Top failed it. Got to shoot the wrong way. Doesn't really matter. We still cleared one of the 2. That's fine. Another pro tip, though, for this boss is you could actually AMS the ability, the dot. It's dispellable, but, you know, there's 2 out at a time. You have to predict it. There's no actual timer. But as you see, successfully AMS'd it. Just kind of sit on your global. Wait to make sure you do it. And now get your back to this here. And, you know, when it happens, it's going to clear out. We actually probably kill it before it happens. But either way, you get, again, back to the puddle. Clear it every time. And that's that. It's as easy as pie. Really, I can't. It's so crazy. Anyway, really, it's so crazy how easy this boss is. Yet everybody messes it up. And the main mistake that you're going to make in here is people are going to have this puddles get sprayed all over the place because they're not stacked up. The boss is constantly like shooting her gun in random directions, and you're just covered in Like if you do it wrong, like this is actually what happens. Let's talk about this. If you have her like say over in the corner there, and there's puddles like here, say they're like here and like here, okay? Well, if she like so for some reason we have her facing where I am now. So if she shoots her gun at blue, like I don't even know how to describe this, but for some reason the action of her shooting towards blue is gonna push red forward. So it's gonna push the red puddle from where it was to like there. And then you're screwed. Like you just covered your, like you have the boss there, now you're covered. So this is a big error. Always clear the puddles. Just don't worry about anything else. Clear the puddles. Easiest fight in the game.
Gotcha. I can see, I saw why I was making the mistakes I was while I was doing it, because I was anticipating too much. The propelling and going through too early, and that was causing her to move a different way.
Okay. Yeah, you just got to get the timing down. I think she'll do the mechanic every 2 like other mechanic sets, so you'll get used to it. It's just timing, but it's not too crazy. Now, something that I should alert you to here is this actually does damage to you. I'm absorbing it because I have the magic shield on, but it does nature damage, this oil. So a lot of the times, it even happens on the way to this boss. A lot of people don't, like, you could actually like avoid 100% of it here if you just jump. Like if you jump, you don't take damage from it. But on the other way past, you can't do it, right? So I mean, maybe if you mount up, you can make the jump. I don't know, but most people don't. So you're going to take a lot of damage if you run through this. So just be aware. This mob type is actually, this war machine is actually probably the hardest mob in the dungeon. And it's what forced me to realize that this route should be reconsidered on a much higher key than I normally do. Because this charged shot does an insane amount of physical damage. I'm telling you, it did 100% of my health over it ticks 3 times, 100% of my health over those 3 ticks. I pretty much, if I didn't have a CD up, I was gonna die. So it was pretty nuts. We wiped her quite a lot last night. And the technicians themselves are the only mob that you could like grip and stun and stuff. It does a lot of casts, and they're gonna try to heal and stuff to the war machine. They're gonna buff the war machine. So you got to make sure people interrupt that. Almost nobody ever does, because they're like, "Oh, war machine, me deeps, I attacked that thing." You know what I mean? Like everybody's trying to kill the priority target, but then they end up letting the small mobs buff the priority target. So suboptimal. After that, everything here is just really kind of silly. Like it doesn't move easily. It doesn't auto attack. It does a bunch of like casts that can't be interrupted. So just get ready for kind of mayhem here. This is why a lot of people probably skip it, because it's so difficult to manipulate it. But the one thing that I will say about this area here is that it actually those bombs. Here, let's kill this pack and then we'll talk about these bombs. See these bombs that are on the ground? They actually are mechanics. So artillery barrage, obviously you want to interrupt that. It's just gonna put a giant, like these red circles that are happening anyway. It's gonna put a lot more of them on the ground. But otherwise, these mobs don't really do anything. They're also things that you can stun and stuff. But yeah, so those bombs are actually mobs, and they do give count if you kill them. If they blow themselves up, they do not. Actually, maybe they changed that now. I think in season 2 that was the case, but I think they did change it. One way or the other, they give like 0.4% count. So whenever you run close to them, you see they kind of get alerted. Run away from it. Run away. You'll see it seek and destroy, like the Metallica song, one of the best songs, and then they're gonna hit you for a lot of nature damage. It will splash. So if me and Cop were standing right on top of each other when it targeted and exploded on me, he would also get hit. And let's leave it up to the imagination how hard these hit on the 20 fortified. I think you guys might have a pretty good idea. They hit really freaking hard. So there's not really much you can do about it other than kill it. You could stun it, root it, blah blah blah. It won't be able to get to you. But if it reaches the target that it's tracking on, it will explode for a massive amount of nature damage. This mechanic here, Azurite Heartseeker, this is actually present on the boss too. But it's this red line, and it's gonna try to basically shoot like you're Bradley Cooper, you know what I mean? It's gonna snipe you, and you're just gonna you can interrupt it. Let's put it, or you can intercept it. Sorry, as the tank, you can intercept it. So we'll probably see it again here, but it's gonna try to shoot Cop, and then I'm just gonna stand in the way of it and not let it shoot my. We're friends, so that's what good friends do. Also, this concussion thing, there you go. Prime mistake, only it didn't really cause a problem. A lot of the times I'll be fighting them right here because they jump around. There's that Azrai Heartseeker. When it's on me, it's perfect. So let me get knocked down here. It didn't happen, but a lot of the times if you get hit by that knockback, you'll get knocked down into this. And this is pretty bad because not only are you down here, but the mobs are gonna follow you. And as you see, that's really bad. So try not to get knocked down here, especially as a tank. If you're the DPS, it's no big deal because the mobs aren't going to follow you. But if you get knocked down there, it's just going to really crush this packs. Like, it's going to be difficult to keep the mobs where you want them, you know what I'm saying? So, try not to get knocked off that little ledge there because it is pretty dangerous. This environmental damage doesn't really do much. I really feel like that looks badder than it is, just because it's this giant red circle, but it's not really a problem at all. You can stand in it, is what I'm trying to say if you have to. Between that and another mechanic, use the other mechanic for sure. So again, the charge shot here, you're going to have to fight some of these. There's no, I mean, unless you're skipping the whole area, you're not going to be that overcount. But anyway, I'll show you guys a little skip here, even without dying. Without a death skip, you can actually still skip one of the hardest packs in here. If you did do the death skip, I guess we could talk a little bit about it. This final one is pretty easy, basically. You just mount up, jump across this, again, the bomb there. So I'll show you AMS. Let's do that. Boom, didn't take damage. Anyway, yeah, you just mount up. You'd kill the boss, whatever. Let's pretend we kill the boss. You just kill the boss, mount up, jump across here, make sure you don't take a bunch of damage on the way. And then you literally just ride. You want to kind of like hug this skeleton of this like bridge here. It'll aggro. You'll take the least melees. Let's put it that way. And then you just go all the way up and down there. But anyway, we're not gonna do that. Attack. I say even right now I'm doing this. Probably in season 4 we'll probably change what we're doing, but for now I don't. Most of this trash is not dangerous enough to matter. But watch, I'm gonna intercept this Heartseeker. As you see, hit me instead of cop. So that's a really good play if you're the tank. Pretty nice, you know. And again, you could also, if you need a little bit of extra count. No, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna skip this pack, this War Machine, and these mobs are extremely dangerous. A very, very high health pack, and very dangerous pack, like we described. They also have another one of those technicians, so they're gonna try to heal and buff the robot. You really you don't want to do that, man. You really. So if for some reason you don't have 100% count here, just try to get 100% from the rest of this. It's not a problem. The rest of the trash is easy enough. But I am now going to show you how you can actually skip. This pack without doing a proper death skip. So what I'm going to do, cop. Well, let's kill the bomb first, just to make. You don't necessarily need to kill this bomb, but every once in a while it bugs out and causes problems. So it is best to just run up here and kill it. Just auto attack it. It'll die. So what I'm going to do, cop, is I'm going to grab threat on these mobs, and I'm going to tank them. I'm going to drag them over to Skull. Okay, over there. We're going to get them as far away from the area as possible, and then when they're about at, it's kind of like at red, like when they're about, when they've moved towards red, you can just hug the right here. I'll put a marker. You could hug kind of like right by blue and just sneak right by them. You won't get in combat, and then you'd be able to res me, provided I'm close enough. As a non-healer, it's a lot harder to res somebody like this. So if for some reason you have no healer, I guess, or the healer died as well, it's probably gonna be a mistake to do this. But yeah, if you have the 100-yard mass res, which everybody has, by the way. I had a guy arguing that he didn't have mass res. You have it, it's just not called mass res. Anyway, every healer has the option here. So I'll show you what to do. I'm gonna grab this stuff. You might put D&D down, something like that. Just get over here as quick as possible. You're gonna want to stay alive. Maybe like 1 or 2 globals. You're gonna want to stay alive just to make sure that everybody gets past. And then you can run a little bit closer. So yeah, you should be good there on the stairs. No. Stay up there. Stay up there. You should be good there. And I'm gonna die. And then yeah, you'll res me. We'll skip this pack. Obviously on Mythic Plus, I'm gonna die a lot faster than this. It shouldn't take me like 30 seconds to die. It would probably die within like 2 or 3 seconds. See, we actually fucked it up because it took me so long to die. Now that bomb is gonna put you in combat, I think. Are you in combat?
Yep.
Yeah. Nah, that's fine. Well, actually, it's a good opportunity to talk about the other place for a warlock. This is another great place for a warlock because here I'll do it. We'll do it again, and I'll just pull him way farther so that doesn't happen. Anyway, yeah, the warlock also has potential to use the gate here. We'll show that too. But yeah, this is another great place for a warlock. You can put a gate, I believe, like right here, and then up, kind of like up the ledge, like kind of like up towards silver or something like that, and then you kind of just go flying through the wall there, and it allows you to skip this pack with the warlock, and then nobody needs to die. Right now, what we're doing is I'm the only one who needs to die. That's a good sacrifice because it's just one person instead of 5 people. You know what I mean? If you were trying to do this in another way, you'd have multiple people. Not ideal. I'll try to die a little bit faster so it doesn't bug out again. Yeah, typically this is the only reason we just had that error happen is because it took so long to die that he actually threw a bomb at Cop, and never happens. Never happens on a key because obviously I'm gonna get killed in like 5 seconds. Man, it's taking forever to kill me. That's funny. Azurite Veins is doing work. All right, should be good. Should be able to res me.
I think you're still out of range. No, I got you. I got you.
Cool. Yeah, it should always be good. As long as the person's on the stairs and I'm near this ring of fire area, then it should always work. And there you go. So we've just successfully skipped that pack, and we're now on to the last boss. This boss is actually extremely easy on low keys. Probably one of the easier end bosses in the game. But on hard keys, on high keys, it's very, very, very dangerous. And it's kind of funny why. The hardest part of the boss is actually the like the intermission type mechanic, where you're waiting, you're doing the thing in between the main phases. That is actually extremely dangerous because it has those mechanics that do the Heart Seeker again. The tank is going to have to block them. But otherwise, a lot of people lust there actually because it's so dangerous. But if you're doing just a regular key, you're usually going to lust on Rixa, and then you won't have lust up for the start of this fight, so you're just lust at the end of it. It almost always, like, unless, again, in Season 4 the routes change entirely, you'd have lust for Rixa and this fight for sure, unless you're just cruising. If you lusted Rixa and you don't have lust for this, it means that you're crushing the key. But one very, very, very pro tip I'm going to give you guys. This mechanic, the fire here, basically how it works, I'll put some markers actually. These bots kind of fly around to these different locations. They could be kind of anywhere in any of these 4 colors. There's 2 bots, so the left side is either going to be skull or red, and the other side is going to be this. So like they're going to be all over the place, and a lot of the times it's going to be really difficult to see where they are. Ideally, you would just look and dodge them. It's a pretty easy thing to do if you're paying attention, but it's harder than it sounds, right? So instead, some geniuses found out that there is actually a spot that no matter what configuration of these robots, you will never get hit by fire directly on this circle marker. Now, it's as close as like there, the yellow marker, you will get hit. So what you want to do is you want to have the boss kind of at, like right at orange where it was, and then you standing on top of it. So I'll show you what I mean. But you'll see, might as well just let it play out, and we'll show that every single mechanic doesn't hit. The problem here is the tank is it takes a while to get the boss over here. And you're also going to get hit by this missile if everybody stacks, but it doesn't even matter. Like, you can easily heal through it. So as you see it misses us, and you just got to move out of the Gatling gun, obviously, and back in. Sometimes the Gatling gun kind of forces you out of position, but it's oftentimes better to just take a hit from the Gatling gun than move into those fire bombs. Those things do a lot of damage. If you get hit by these, you're probably going to get one shot. So, you know, Gatling gun. Ideally, the tank could turn it. The boss is always going to start the Gatling gun facing where he was. But as you see, another clear thing. Even though the heads are facing us, there's still a little gap there, they say. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know what to say about this. I guess maybe Blizzard did this on purpose to give very astute players a heads up. But you pretty much, I would say, always tank the boss here. Like, you know, we even have this really, really, really close to us, right? There's no reason that this shouldn't hit us. Yet again, standing right here, wide open. You know what I mean? So it's kind of crazy. But that's pretty much the fight. I mean, this boss is really straightforward when you do that, and the rest of the mechanics aren't dangerous. The big thing on really hard keys, that Gatling gun rips you open. It's all physical damage as well. And the mobs in the second part. So we'll talk about that when we get there. It's going to happen at 50%. A lot of the times, we'll catch them in between mechanics. So if you can push from 50 really quick, like we're about to do here, I'll actually get them much lower than 50. fully transitioned, so you see 46 or something, so that's pretty good. So anyway, 2 ads are going to come out. They're the same ads, effectively, that we were fighting before. They're going to do mechanics that you could interrupt. Concussive shot, it's the same thing. You could interrupt it. If you get hit by it, you'll get knocked back, as you see. But the main thing is they're going to do Azrai Hard Signature. Again, whoever this hits is going to take a ton of fire damage, and it's blockable, so the tank should block it. Now, Cop got the mechanic that's probably most noticeable in the face. He's going to, like, target a player, and that player needs to make him hit these stalks of dynamite. If you miss, basically, so there you go, we missed. So every time he hits the deck, you take a bunch of damage, as you're going to see. Take some damage. But if you miss, it's just elongating the phase and making you take way more damage. Like, on a really hard key, this is so dangerous that if you miss even once, you might wipe. And the main reason is it's just this big AoE damage. Now, here's a mistake that you might make if you're slow getting here. Watch this. I'm still going to make it. It looks like I made it, but the boss doesn't care. He's going to... Well, he might actually hit it. He still hit it. But either way, my point is that it's very often that if people are reacting slow, they won't make it there in time. And even though it looks like they're there, they're not actually there quick enough. So again, pull him over, stand on this little edge right here. And that's that. The boss is easy. Really can't fail this boss on anything but a super hard key. At that point, it's really, really difficult. Nothing really changes strategy-wise. It's just the numbers are insane, and every little mistake is going to add up. But yeah, you know, ideally you'll look at where the robots are if it's really dangerous. Like the first time we ever did this on a really hard key, 18, beginning of season 3, like the first week, people just didn't feel comfortable stacking, and you basically just have to call out every head then, you know, because if you're gonna dodge them, you have to know where they are. Also, the boss like jumps out at the end. So that's that. Multiple ways to attack, to figuratively attack this dungeon, and multiple things that you can and can't skip. Like I said, there's really probably like 300% count in here. It's an absolutely giant dungeon, and every single boss is skippable. You can just ride right by them. So what do you think, Cup?
I think this dungeon is all about precision pathing and precision placement of everything, you know? Interruptions, where you're standing, where you're moving. It's all about being precise about everything. Just that's kind of
I would agree.
Kind of what I'm
making sure that you interrupt and disrupt these mobs is the #1 thing to do in this dungeon. So, you know, typically we'll talk about what the biggest mistake in here, like the noob moment in here. Really, it's just not interrupting. I mean, I have to say it. Like, if you're gonna walk in here and not interrupt, you're done. You're not gonna be able to do this dungeon. There's too many different dangerous mechanics. And I'll tell you, man, there's a lot of times that I do this with people who literally interrupt like 4 times the entire dungeon. And it's very, very noticeable. Luckily, as a Blood DK, you can do a lot of work. You can really do a lot that's going to help out. But just don't come in here and not interrupt. That's the biggest tip I can give you guys. Even if you interrupt stuff that doesn't seem like you're not sure if you need to interrupt it, just interrupt. It doesn't matter. As long as 4+ people are interrupting and knocking back and using things like rings and stuns and all that to interrupt these mobs, this dungeon is a joke. The trash in here is very, very, very easy. But if you don't do any of that, like if you literally didn't interrupt a single mechanic start to finish, you would probably wipe on every single path. Like honestly, you'd probably die to trash probably 10-15 times throughout the dungeon, because that's how dangerous some of these trash mobs are.
Every single guide I've ever looked up when I was trying to figure out how to go from just being the most casual person who ever played the game to somebody who's actually decent at it, one of the first things they always say is interrupt everything, because so it becomes second nature for you. And I think this dungeon really exemplifies that.
Yeah, this is definitely the #1. And mostly it's not just actual interrupting too. It's stunning, rings, knockbacks, paralysis, anything that you have that can interrupt the cast. You want to do it. You want to interrupt the cast. Like when they're casting, use a stun, use a knockback, use a ring, use a paralysis. Just prevent them from casting. Even it's like, you know, like knocking the ball out of bounds in basketball. You didn't get the ball back, but you disrupted them enough that it's going to make a momentum swing eventually. You know, that's what you got to think about in this dungeon. If you don't do it, you're in trouble. And there's a lot of dungeons where interrupts are important, but there's no dungeon that they're this prevalent throughout the entire dungeon.
Defense wins championships.
That's what they say. All right, so anyway, that's Motherlode. This one's particularly interesting, and we'll see how it plays out in season 4. But any closing thoughts?
Not really. I like this is one I'm gonna want to practice a lot, especially because even on a Mythic Zero, it has a chance of dropping a mount.
Does it?
Yeah. Mythic Zeros like this. It's on the Mythic the table for Mythic Zeros. That's one thing I was gonna ask you. Have you ever seen the mount drop in a Mythic Plus?
There's no mount from this one. There's the pattern to make a mount if you're an engineer. The mounts are from King's Rest, Freehold,
my apologies.
and Underrot.
I thought there was a mount off the last one, but no, you're right. That's the pattern.
A pattern. You get the pattern, and then you make the mount as an engineer. But yeah,
my apologies.
I can't drop a Mythic Plus.
That's my new moment of the dungeon.
Yeah, there's three dungeons in Mythic Plus. We haven't actually covered any of them yet, but we'll talk about the mounts when we get there. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions about Motherlode, let me know. Look forward to seeing how it plays out in season 4. Otherwise, see you guys in the next one.
Peace.